Good morning. We're talking today about anxiety. This is the sixth part. I was going to stop after 1 week of talking about being anxious over things, and I had several people contact me, texted me, and emailed me, and spoke to me in person, and said, "Look, I'm struggling with anxiety, fretful over things. Things are really giving me trouble." Now, if you're not struggling with what's going on in the world right now, economically, the pandemic, the evident control that we see happening in a lot of political environments, and even more control that people are trying to heap upon us, and praise the Lord, I'm thankful for you. But don't become haughty and imagine that you can't be affected by the fears and the troubles that seem to assail us. Jesus Christ tells us some things, particularly, and I'm thinking about the book of Matthew, chapter number 6, where he begins to speak about earthly treasures. And the text says this in Matthew 6:19. It says, "Lay not up for yourself treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal." If that is where your security and your hope to remove anxiety is, then you're going to be really sad, because thieves are going to break through, they're going to steal. Moth and rust doth corrupt. Things degrade, things go away, nothing lasts. I was talking to my wife yesterday, and I said it's amazing how expensive home ownership is, how many things break and how much needs repairing. She called me yesterday on the phone, and she said, "Hey, one of our front porch posts is laying on the porch. It just fell off." Well, the porch rails have been here since this house was built, and they've weathered pretty roughly, and I need to replace every rail on that front porch because it's a thing, and moth and rust doth corrupt. In other words, things don't stay like they always have, which is a beautiful reminder that this world is full of sin. He says, "Lay not up for yourself treasures on this earth." If my hope and my joy is wrapped up in good porch rails and a good front porch, well, then I'm really doomed, because that porch, even if I went out there tomorrow and I replaced all the rotten wood, would rotten once again. But he tells us this in verse 20, "But lay up for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through and steal." And he says, so that's where our treasures ought to be being laid up. That's where we ought to be making some deposits. But he tells us the real basis to this in verse number 21. He says, "For where your heart is," this is such a key, so for where your treasure is, that's it, "For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." So if I'm laying treasure up here on earth, my heart's going to be tied into that. So when something doesn't work out with it, I'm going to become very anxious. I was jotting down some notes last week as I was studying all this out, and I was just thinking about this. If I call something a need in my life, and then I lose that thing in my life and become very anxious over it, the truth is, if I continue to survive without it, how much of a need is it really? I think we label needs in our life, and then when we don't have those things, we become very, very anxious. We have a church family who's recently moved, and they're now in a location where they don't have internet access, they have spotty phone service and all these things. And I asked them, I said, "How are you handling that?" And they were kind of like, "Well, we thought it was a need. And now we're discovering it'd be nice to have it, but we're surviving without it." And I think many of us think, "Oh man, if I didn't have a cell phone, if I didn't have internet, if I didn't have whatever, I couldn't survive because I need that." Well, again, it goes back to our text, doesn't it? In verse 21, "For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." I will begin to worry if I don't have that thing that I think is a need, if I don't believe that God can provide it. So if I'm thinking God can't provide for me and He can't take care of me, I'm going to fret when a thing that I suppose that's a need is really not there. I want to learn to trust God in all of these avenues so that I am not anxious.